As America marks 250 years, we begin by honoring the nation, the flag, and every generation that carried the promise of liberty forward. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Happy birthday, America! Welcome to the grand finale of Books Brews, Titletown's Patriots.
We made it.
We really did. And we are coming to you right now from outside Dricky Yard Studios in Bellevue, Wisconsin.
Yep, right outside.
And I got to tell you, it's sitting at about 77% humidity out here right now.
It is thick.
Yeah, super thick. The sky is this kind of bruised purple with 80% cloud cover. Honestly, it's sort of the perfect atmospheric backdrop for today's deep dive.
Sets the mood for sure.
Exactly. So the official July 4 forecast is calling for a few possible thunderstorms. We're looking at a high near 76, a low near 65, and a 57% chance of rain.
Which means we might be running inside at any moment.
Right, because it feels like 70 right now, but with that UV index of 7 and these northeast winds kicking up near 9 miles per hour, it definitely feels a bit unsettled.
Yeah, very muggy.
We are definitely keeping a very close eye on the sky. But let me be entirely clear with you, we are not complaining for a single second.
Not at all.
Because we both remember exactly what a Wisconsin winter feels like, right?
Absolutely. A heavy, muggy summer afternoon is just, it's an absolute luxury when you hold it up against what February on the frozen tundra actually does to your bones.
So true. And we are settled in for an extra long 1 hour plus grand finale today.
Settle in, folks.
Yeah, the stakes for this specific discussion are profound.
Right.
We are exploring a core theme for the nation's semi-quincentennial.
Big word.
I practiced it. But basically, American history isn't just preserved in famous, polished speeches.
Right. Or like pristine marble monument.
Exactly. It survives through the dirt, the sweat, and the sheer endurance of ordinary citizens. The people who served, rescued, organized, carried messages, fed starving armies, and defended their communities when nobody else was coming to save them.
That's about the ground level.
It really is. And over the course of this deep dive series, we've gone on quite a journey. If you've been with us, you know we started with the early League and the trenches of World War I.
Which was brutal.
Beyond brutal. Then we moved through the massive, world-altering disruption of World War II, the bitter chill of Korea, the complex tension of the Cold War, right up to the dedication of modern service members.
Yeah, all the way to today.
And in the fifth part of our series, we took a really focused, intense look at Emlyn Tunnel and Howard Smiley Johnson.
Two incredible stories.
Really incredible. And I just want to briefly acknowledge Smiley Johnson right here at the top. We aren't going to retell his entire story today because, we devoted so much time to it previously.
Right. Highly recommend going back to listen to that if you haven't.
Absolutely. But we do honor him today as the Packers' only known combat death. He made the ultimate sacrifice on the black sands of Iwo Jima.
We carry his memory with us today. And honestly, the weight of that sacrifice anchors everything we are going to talk about over the next hour.
Well said. So, to truly understand the scope of American patriotism as this nation marks 250 years, we have to look at how the history of Green Bay football perfectly maps onto the military history of the Republic.
They are completely intertwined.
They really are. We have this incredible intersection between professional athletes and military service. But it's so much more than just a lake of names who wore a uniform, right? What is the actual shape of this intersection?
The sheer scale of it across the generations is what truly staggers you when you dig into the archives. We are talking about hundreds of men across the league.
Wow.
Yeah, and dozens upon dozens of Green Bay players whose physical primes and life trajectories were just fundamentally altered by global conflict. But we have to be very careful to distinguish the different paths accurately here. This service was not monolithic.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the public imagination often just immediately defaults to a guy in a muddy foxhole with a rifle. But that's only a fraction of the reality.
Sure, that makes sense.
We are looking at a vast, complex spectrum. You have intense combat deployments, yes, but you also have highly technical aviation roles, stateside reserve duty, rigorous academy training, and post-football enlistment.
Okay, I want to ground this in some specific stories because otherwise it just feels like, abstract statistics. Let's talk about Tony Canadeo.
The Gray Ghost.
The man they call the Gray Ghost, exactly. I was looking at his timeline and it kind of blew my mind. He completely missed the 1944 and 1945 seasons to serve in the United States Army during World War II.
Which really requires us to think about the physical economy of a professional athlete.
How so?
An NFL career is incredibly short, even today. But back then, it was brutal.
Right. You only have a few years where your body is at its absolute peak, where you can absorb that kind of punishment and perform at an elite level.
Exactly.
And Tony Canadeo just surrenders 2 of those prime years to the Army. But the craziest part to me is what happens when he comes back in 1946.
It's remarkable.
How does a guy take 2 years off from elite athletics, serve in the military during a world war, and then return to eventually become only the 3rd 1,000-yard rusher in pro football history? Like, what is happening physiologically and mentally there?
Mentally, I think you are looking at a recalibration of what actually constitutes adversity.
That's a good way to put it.
When you've been subjected to military discipline, rationing, and just the baseline stress of wartime service, being asked to run through a defensive line probably doesn't trigger the same stress response as it does for a rookie who just got out of college.
Yeah, a linebacker probably doesn't seem that scary after a war.
Right. And physiologically, it's just a testament to incredible natural durability. But we also have to remember that military conditioning during that era was intense. It was explicitly designed for raw endurance.
Which brings up a totally different kind of service. I want to talk about Andy Urim.
Oh, yeah. Great example.
This guy was an explosive running back. He held a franchise record for a 97-yard run that stood for decades. But he joins the Navy in 1944, and his service takes a really specific, interesting form.
It really does.
He played Armed Forces football for the Camp Peary Naval Training Station and Fleet City Navy. And I think a lot of people hear Armed Forces football and they picture, I don't know, a casual game of touch football on the base.
Yeah, maybe playing in the mud on a Sunday.
Exactly. But that's not what this was it?
Not at all. That is a massive misconception.
Yeah.
The Armed Forces football leagues during World War II were essentially professional, highly militarized shadow leagues.
Shadow leagues.
Yeah. The military deliberately drafted and utilized elite athletes, professional baseball players, boxers, football stars, for 2 very specific strategic purposes: morale and fundraising.
How does that actually work in practice, though?
Think about the psychological state of millions of young men being ripped from their homes. They're put into grueling basic training, preparing to be shipped overseas to face potential death. The tension was immense.
Right, just a total pressure cooker.
Exactly. The military recognized they needed high-level, visceral entertainment to manage that psychological pressure cooker. So they built these super teams.
Super teams of drafted pros.
Yeah. Camp Peary and Fleet City had rosters that often rivaled or even exceeded the talent level of the civilian NFL teams left behind, simply because all the best players had been drafted into the service.
So these guys are out there playing full contact, brutal football to keep the troops from losing their minds before they ship out.
Yes, and to sell millions of dollars in war bonds. They were playing in front of massive, packed stadiums. The level of competition was ferocious because these guys were playing for base pride, and their commanding officers took it extremely seriously. It was a vital part of the home front propaganda and morale machine.
That makes total sense. But then you have players who found themselves in the absolute most harrowing, terrifying situations imaginable. Far from any football field. I'm talking about Hal Van Every.
His story is one of the most intense survival narratives in the franchise's history, just incredibly dark.
He was a 1940 first-round pick for Green Bay. First round, the world is his oyster. But he enlists in the Army Air Corps and becomes a B-17 bomber pilot.
Which was incredibly dangerous duty.
Yeah. And in May 1944, his aircraft is shot down over the German-Polish border. He survives the crash, which is a miracle in itself, but he is captured.
Right.
He ends up spending nearly a year as a prisoner of war in Stalag Luft III. Now, I know the name Stalag Luft III from the movies, but what is the actual historical reality of that specific camp?
It's grim. Stalag Luft III was a notoriously secure Luftwaffe camp, specifically designed to hold captured Allied airmen. It's located in what is now Poland.
Why airmen specifically?
The German military put airmen there because they considered pilots and flight crews to be high-value, highly intelligent, and highly motivated escape risks. This is actually the camp where the famous Great Escape took place in March of 1944.
Wait, so just a couple of months before Van Every was shot down?
Exactly.
So he arrives right in the aftermath of the Great Escape. The atmosphere must have been completely toxic.
It was suffocating. Following the Great Escape, the Gestapo executed 50 of the recaptured Allied airmen. The Geneva Conventions were essentially thrown out the window by Hitler regarding these men.
Oh my God.
So when Van Every arrives, the camp is on a hair trigger. The guards are paranoid, punitive, and brutal.
What does a day in the life actually look like for a guy like Van Every in that camp? Because I'm trying to wrap my head around a 200-pound professional athlete trying to survive in a Nazi POW camp for a year.
It is a profound physical deterioration. The architecture of the camp itself was designed for psychological warfare. The husks were raised off the ground so guards could see if anyone was tunneling.
Wow.
They had seismograph microphones buried in the dirt to detect digging. But the most immediate threat was the caloric deficit.
Starvation.
Yes. The standard daily German ration for a POW was abysmal. Watery turnip soup, maybe a few potatoes, and this notoriously dense, horrible bread that was often cut with sawdust to make it go further.
Wait, sawdust? Literally eating wood filler?
Yes. They were surviving on maybe 800 to 1,000 calories a day, if they were lucky. And that was supplemented only by whatever Red Cross parcels managed to get through the collapsing German railway system.
That's nothing, especially for an athlete.
For a man with the muscle mass and metabolic engine of a professional football player, that level of starvation causes the body to literally consume its own muscle tissue just to keep the organs functioning.
That is horrifying.
You add the freezing Polish winter, the lack of medical care, and the constant gnawing psychological terror that the SS might just decide to liquidate the camp as the Soviet army approaches it, utterly redefines what we consider a tough experience. Van Every survived an ordeal of sheer grinding attrition.
It's unbelievable. And the thing is, this ethos of putting it all on the line, it didn't end in 1945. It continues into the modern era. Look at Darren College.
Yes, a modern hero.
This is a guy who wins Super Bowl XLV with Green Bay in 2011. He plays a 9-year NFL career. He makes his money. He gets the ring. His body is probably already beat to hell from a decade in the trenches of the offensive line.
He's done more than enough.
Right. He does not have to do a single other thing for the rest of his life. But in 2016, he enlists in the Army National Guard.
And he doesn't just, enlist to do PR or something safe. He becomes a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter repairer and then actively volunteers to deploy to Afghanistan with a medevac crew.
Okay, stop right there. Because I want to understand what a medevac crew actually does in a combat zone like Afghanistan. I feel like we use these military terms so casually, but what is the physical reality of that job?
It is one of the most demanding, high-stakes, chaotic roles in modern warfare. A standard aviation unit might fly troops from point A to point B in relatively secure air corridors.
Right.
A medevac crew's entire job is to fly directly into the places where everything has just gone catastrophically wrong. If a unit is taking heavy fire and takes casualties, they call the medevac.
So they are flying into the fire.
That means college and its crew are flying an unarmored, highly complex machine into an active firefight, trying to hover or land in unpredictable mountainous terrain or blowing sand while people are actively shooting at them just to load bleeding, traumatized soldiers into the back.
And he's a repairer, so he knows exactly how fragile that machine is.
Precisely. He knows every bolt and hydraulic line that could be severed by ground fire. The noise inside a Black Hawk is deafening. The vibration shakes you to your core. The margin for error is absolute zero. You are racing the golden hour, that critical window of time, to get a wounded soldier to a surgical unit before they bleed out.
See, what really stuck with me when I was looking at the sources on College wasn't just the danger, but how his commanding officers talked about him.
What did they say?
They noted that he used his NFL team-building skills, that specific locker room leadership, to motivate his fellow soldiers. He wasn't walking around saying, hey, I won a Super Bowl, I'm a big deal.
Right, no ego.
None. He was using that emotional intelligence you build on a football team to keep guys focused when the stress was off the charts. He just wanted to serve alongside them. And this deep, enduring connection between the team and the military, it lives on today through things like the Stars and Stripes honor flights.
Yes, the green and gold flight is a beautiful modern tradition.
Yeah.
You have these legendary Lombardi-era figures, Nick Rakowski, Donnie Anderson, Jim Grabowski, and Phil Vandersee actively participating.
That is so cool.
They serve as escorts, taking aging veterans on these chartered flights to Washington, D.C. to finally see their respective war memorials.
And the sources describe this amazing, almost surreal mutual awe on these flights. You've got the athletes looking at these veterans guys who stormed the beaches at Normandy or flew through anti-aircraft flak over Germany or fought house to house in Hugh City, and the players view them as absolute, unimpeachable heroes.
And it goes both ways.
Right, because you look at the veterans, and they are looking at the players, the guys who wore the green and gold during the glory years, and they view the players as living legends.
It creates this profound shared respect. It collapses the distance between them. For players like Bratkowski, this is deeply personal. He was an Air Force pilot himself.
Oh, wow, I forgot about that.
Yeah, he famously stated on the record that he values his pilot wings every bit as much as his Super Bowl rings.
That says everything.
Or take Jim Grabowski, who lost a very close friend in the Vietnam War. For him, escorting these veterans isn't a photo op. It's a deeply emotional act of remembrance. It bridges the gap between civic entertainment and civic duty.
You know, if you really think about it, well, not ... but you know what I mean. The physical and mental conditioning of that early military service literally served as the blueprint for the rugged, two-way Iron Man era of early professional football.
Oh, absolutely.
When this franchise was founded back in 1919, the roster was packed with guys who were just coming back from the trenches of World War I in France. The discipline wasn't just symbolic, it was incredibly tactical.
You're hitting on the core foundational DNA of the entire sport right there. In the early 1920s, you didn't have specialized offensive and defensive squads. You had two-way players.
Right, you never left the field.
You played offense, the ball turned over, and you stayed on the field to play defense. You played essentially 60 minutes of brutal, grinding football with a leather helmet and virtually no protective padding.
So you have to be able to endure a ridiculous amount of pain.
Exactly. And where did they learn to endure that pain? Where did they learn to rely completely on the man standing next to them? In the military.
Wow. Where?
The unit cohesion required to survive a sustained artillery barrage in the Argonne Forest translated directly to the grit required to hold the line on a frozen dirt field in Wisconsin. They knew how to execute complex orders under extreme physical duress because the military had drilled it into their nervous systems.
So while some of these early players served a single tour and brought that toughness back to the gridiron, others found their NFL careers repeatedly interrupted by global conflicts that just kept happening.
Over and over.
And that leads us directly to two of the most remarkable resumes in league history. But first, we're going to take a quick break.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back after these messages from the superfans featured in Tales from the Frozen Tundra. Superfans of Titletown.
They said no one survives the frozen tundra. They were wrong. He didn't just survive. He became it. One man, one life.
Hey everyone, Jeff Kalo, Lambeau Field's Frozen Tundra Man. Hey, I'm honored to pass this along to all my Facebook followers and all those diehard Green Bay Packer fans. That singer, songwriter, and author, Dr. Denny Toll, has created a book entitled Tales from the Frozen Tundra. It features intriguing stories from Titletown's finest superfans. However, in order for the book to be published, Denny needs to reach a goal of $3,000 to move forward and get the book published. So if anyone is interested in this unique collectible book, please click on the link below for more information. Nothing will be charged to your credit card if the goal of $3,000 isn't met. The book is a whopping 400 pages long, filled with photographs, interviews, and exclusive rewards. So please check out Kickstarter now and Go Pack Go.
Hi, I'm Bruce Racner, known as the Acme Packer in Green Bay. I like the throwback look, so I put a few renditions together. The West Point sweater, the Lombardi sideline sweater I like. Anyway, I've been a Packer fan 60 years, and I'm honored to be one of the 21 fans portrayed in Dr. Denny Toll's book, Tales from the Frozen Tundra. It's in the Kickstart mode right now. We're raising funds. You can go to the website. There's different tier levels. You can entertain whatever makes you comfortable. We want to get the funds raised. We got 21 more days to meet our goal. So if you have time, check it out. And I hope to see you this season in Green Bay for some tailgating. And in the meantime, Go Pack.
Welcome back to Titletown's Patriots. Right before the break, we were talking about how military service interrupted football careers. But for a select few guys, it wasn't just one war.
No, not at all.
They didn't just do their time and get out. It was multiple compounding global conflicts. Let's talk about Bob Forte.
Bob Forte is a fascinating case study in the relentless nature of duty during the mid-20th century.
His timeline is wild.
It is. He was drafted by Green Bay in 1943 in the 11th round, but he defers his NFL dream entirely. He doesn't go to training camp. Instead, he serves as a tank officer in the 8th Armored Division under General George S. Patton in the European theater.
Okay, serving under Patton in armored warfare in Europe, I can't even imagine. What is it actually like to be a tank officer in World War II? Because again, it sounds cool in a movie, but the reality has to be a nightmare.
It is a visceral, claustrophobic nightmare. You are enclosed in a steel box, usually an M4 Sherman tank, which the crews often morbidly called Ronsons.
Like the lighter.
Exactly like the lighter, because they had a tendency to burst into flames when hit. You are navigating a devastated, muddy European landscape. The noise inside the tank is deafening. The roar of the engine, the clanking of the treads, the blast of the main gun.
And it must smell awful.
The air is thick with the smell of diesel fuel, sweat, and cordite from the spent shells. And you are constantly targeted by German anti-tank weapons, specifically the dreaded 88mm guns, which could punch right through your armor from a mile away.
Just sitting ducks.
You are essentially a high-profile target rolling through a war zone.
So Forte endures that. He survives Patton's grueling push across Europe. He is finally discharged in 1946. He comes back to Green Bay, rebuilds his body, and becomes a major two-way player, a halfback and a linebacker.
A very successful one, too.
Yeah. He becomes a highly respected veteran in the locker room. He finally has his life back. But then, in 1951, the Korean War breaks out, and the phone rings. Forte is recalled to active duty.
He puts his NFL career on hold yet again. He serves another 15 months, deployed to Japan and Korea.
Think about the psychological whiplash of that. To survive the trauma of Patton's European campaign, spend years acclimating back to civilian life and reaching the absolute peak of professional football, only to get ripped away to the freezing mountains of Korea.
It's a lot to process.
And then, incredibly, he comes back to Green Bay again in 1952 and eventually becomes the team captain. The mental elasticity required to do that without breaking is unreal.
Truly.
But then you look at Al Sparlis, and his resume almost doesn't sound real.
Al Sparlis possesses one of the most extensive, highly decorated military records tied to any professional athlete in American history.
Tell me about it.
During World War II, he flew B-25 bombers in the South Pacific and Southeast Asia theaters.
Hold on. For those of us who aren't military aviation buffs, what makes flying a B-25 so specific? When I think of bombers, I think of those massive planes flying up at 30,000 feet, dropping bombs through the clouds.
You're thinking of the heavy bombers, like the B-17 or B-24. The B-25 Mitchell is a twin-engine medium bomber. It is designed for a completely different kind of warfare.
How so?
It flies much lower, and it was often used for tactical strikes, strafing runs on shipping lanes, or hitting supply lines in the jungle.
Which means you are flying right down in the weeds.
Exactly. Because you are flying at lower altitudes, you are heavily exposed to small arms fire, anti-aircraft artillery from the ground, and enemy fighters.
Oh, man.
It requires a crew of 5 or 6 men working in incredibly tight, unpressurized, vibrating quarters. It is a dangerous, loud machine of war, and missions in the South Pacific were notoriously grueling due to the massive overwater distances and unpredictable tropical weather.
Yeah, you go down out there, you're done.
If your engines fail over the open ocean, your chances of survival are incredibly slim.
And he survived those missions. He came back, and he actually played for Green Bay in 1946. But here's the part that gets me. He chose to return to military aviation.
You didn't have to.
No. But he goes back. He flies combat missions again during the Korean War, and then decades later, he flies again during the Vietnam War.
He earned the Distinguished Flying Cross, which is awarded for heroism or extraordinary achievement in aerial flight and multiple air medals.
Unbelievable.
He eventually retired as a full colonel. He flew bombers in 3 different wars, spanning 3 decades of aviation technology, while maintaining his connection to elite athletics. It is an unparalleled record of sustained service.
So we have these individual stories of incredible sacrifice, but what does this all mean for the team back home as an organization? We have this image of football as a bubble, a distraction from the real world, But geopolitics just kept piercing that bubble.
It definitely did.
And nowhere is that more famous or more dramatic than the 1961 Berlin crisis.
But to understand what happened in Green Bay, we have to pull back and look at the global geopolitical stage in 1961. It is a terrifying year.
Very tense.
The Cold War is at its absolute peak. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev is aggressively pushing to push the Western Allies out of Berlin. The Soviet Union literally begins erecting the Berlin Wall, dividing the city with barbed wire and concrete.
History happening in real time.
The threat of a nuclear exchange between the U.S. and the Soviets isn't just theoretical. It feels imminent.
And President John F. Kennedy has to respond.
Kennedy decides to activate military reserve units and National Guard units across the country. It is a massive chess move to demonstrate American military readiness and resolve to the Soviets.
A show of force.
Exactly. He wants Khrushchev to know that the U.S. can mobilize hundreds of thousands of men instantly. And this massive geopolitical maneuver reaches right into the locker room of the Green Bay Packers.
Right in the absolute middle of their 1961 championship run, you have three of the most critical players on the roster suddenly activated. Running back Paul Hornung, linebacker Ray Nitschke, and wide receiver Boyd Dowler.
They were serving simultaneously as privates first class in the Army Reserves. Nitschke and Dowler were attached to the 32nd Infantry Division, which is the famously decorated Red Arrow Division of the Wisconsin Army National Guard.
And they get the call.
When Kennedy gives the order, they are shipped out to Fort Lewis in Washington State. Hornung is sent to Fort Riley in Kansas.
If you are listening to this right now on your commute or while you're walking the dog, imagine trying to balance your day job and your family life. Now imagine you are these guys.
It's almost impossible.
You are running intense, physically punishing military drills, preparing for a potential World War III ground war scenario with the Soviets on a Wednesday. You are sleeping in barracks, eating mess hall food.
Yep.
And then you are expected to somehow fly across the country and play for an NFL championship on a Sunday against the best athletes in the world.
The physical and logistical strain was immense. They weren't just sitting behind desks. The Red Arrow Division was actively training for combat deployment. And the logistics were occasionally absurd.
Like what?
The Army actually had to manufacture a custom set of fatigues for Ray Nitschke because of his massive 18.5-inch neck.
That's hilarious.
Regular issue gear simply did not fit him. He was a human wrecking ball trying to fit into standard military supply chain clothing.
And Boyd Dowler, despite pulling this insane double duty with the Red Arrow Division in Washington State and the Packers in Wisconsin, he noted on the record that he never missed a single play that entire season.
It's superhuman.
How do you even do that? The discipline required to manage your body and mind through that is staggering. Now, I have to ask you about the legend here, because every Packers fan knows the story.
Oh boy, the legend.
People love the idea of Vince Lombardi, this godlike figure angrily picking up the phone, calling the Pentagon, and pulling strings to get his boys weekend passes so they could play. Did Lombardi really command the U.S. military?
No. And this is where we need to be very careful to separate documented historical facts from the colorful mythology of the NFL. Lombardi was famously furious about losing his players.
I'm sure.
He was a hyper-competitive coach trying to build a dynasty, and he absolutely engaged in some aggressive logistical juggling to secure weekend passes for them to fly back for games. But we must avoid overstating his influence over actual military decisions.
So he didn't just bully a general into letting them go?
Absolutely not. He was a famous football coach, not a four-star general. The military was preparing for a potential nuclear conflict. They did not care about the NFL standings.
Obviously not.
The military granted the passes to these players strictly within their own established regulations regarding weekend leave for reservists, provided they had completed their required training duties. Lombardi just maximized those existing regulations. He didn't rewrite military law.
But the psychological effect on the team when they did make it back was massive, right? The sources talk about when Hornung walked into the locker room right before the championship game.
It was a huge moment.
He had a serious leave conflict. He had essentially risked being classified as AWOL to get there in time.
Yeah.
When he walked through those doors, his teammates said the confidence in the room just surged. The energy shifted completely, and they went out and dominated, winning the 1961 NFL championship.
Get a legendary season.
So we've seen how the Packers defended the modern republic on a global stage in the 20th century. But to truly grasp the history of this region at 250 years, we have to look much deeper, at the ground right beneath their feet. If the Packers defended the Republic, how did the foundation of that Republic actually reach Green Bay, Wisconsin in the first place?
We'll get into that in just a moment.
We'll be right back after this message. Sponsored by Tales from the Frozen Tundra, superfans of Titletown. The history of Green Bay isn't just written on the field, it's written by the fans. Tales from the Frozen Tundra. Superfans of Titletown is the result of more than 7 months of dedicated work. It features 21 Packers superfans across more than 400 pages of in-depth interviews, exclusive photos, and deep dives into the history, traditions, and personal sacrifices that make this fan base entirely unique. This is the first major nonfiction release from Dreckiord Publishing, and it captures the soul of the Frozen Tundra like never before. Pledge now. Go to Kickstarter and search Tales from the Frozen Tundra.
Okay, let's jump back in. We are moving from the Cold War and the mid-20th century. We are dialing the clock all the way back to the early 19th century. Because while the American Revolution was fought primarily on the eastern seaboard, its consequences violently rippled westward.
After the War of 1812 concluded, the young United States government had a massive strategic headache on its hands.
What were they dealing with? The British hadn't completely abandoned their ambitions in North America, and they still had strong ties with various indigenous nations in the Great Lakes region. The U.S. recognized a dire strategic necessity. If they didn't lock down and control the vast Northwest Territory, the British were going to waltz right back in.
Makes sense.
Furthermore, they needed to secure the highly lucrative fur trade routes, which were the economic lifeblood of the frontier. If they couldn't project military and economic power into the Great Lakes, the Republic was incredibly vulnerable.
And that brings us to the establishment of Fort Howard, built in 1816, right on the west bank of the Fox River in present-day Green Bay. Why there?
The Fox River was the superhighway of the era. If you controlled the river, you controlled the flow of goods, troops, and information from the Great Lakes down toward the Mississippi River system. Fort Howard was built upon the ruins of an old French encampment by Major Charles Gratiot.
The records show the initial estimated cost was $16,644.70, which in 1816 was a massive federal expenditure.
It was a serious investment. It was heavily fortified, featuring a massive whitewashed log stockade, blockhouses for artillery, and a hospital.
You're a real stronghold.
It literally served as the vanguard of American civilization, federal law, and military authority in a wild region. It was even briefly commanded by Zachary Taylor, a man who would leverage his frontier military career to eventually become the President of the United States.
But here's the logistical nightmare. A fort in the middle of the wilderness is completely useless if you can't supply it. You have to move troops, heavy munitions, food, and mail. You can't rely entirely on freezing rivers.
Right.
So in the 1830s, the War Department authorizes the Old Military Road. The plan is to connect Fort Howard in Green Bay to Fort Winnebago in Portage, and onward to Fort Crawford in Prairie du Chien.
The logistics of building this road were absolutely brutal. It was constructed by soldiers between 1835 and 1837, costing the government $12,000 and spanning roughly 234 miles across Wisconsin.
But wait, when we say road, we aren't talking about a nice gravel turnpike, right? How are a bunch of soldiers in the 1830s building a 200-mile road through virgin forest?
To call it a road by modern standards is incredibly generous. It was a crude, brute force engineering project. They didn't have bulldozers or dynamite. They had axes, cross-cut saws, and draft animals.
Sounds exhausting.
The soldiers literally hacked a path through dense timber. They didn't have the time or tools to uproot the massive trees, so travelers had to navigate foot-high tree stumps left right in the middle of the path. Wagons would constantly break their axles on them.
And what about the swamps? Wisconsin has a lot of wetlands.
When they hit a swamp, they built what were called corduroy roads.
What's that?
They would chop down hundreds of smaller logs and lay them horizontally across the mud to create a floating, bumping, jarring surface. Soldiers and settlers had to drag heavy carts through flooded, disease-ridden swamps. They were constantly exposed to mosquito-borne illnesses, which they called the ague, essentially frontier malaria. It was a miserable, back-breaking endeavor.
If you are listening to this right now, especially if you live in the area, I want you to think about your everyday commute. If you've ever complained about traffic driving down Manitowoc Road in Bellevue or Green Bay today, consider this. You are quite literally driving over the surviving physical arteries of the young republic.
It's wild to think about.
The modern asphalt you drive on to get your groceries sits directly on top of the exact path that sick, exhausted soldiers hacked out of a malaria-ridden swamp in 1835 just to hold this nation together.
It is a profound physical connection to the landscape.
Yeah.
That road eventually brought the settlers that would build the modern state.
It did. But the connection to the Revolution goes even deeper than a military road. The actual blood of the American Revolution is literally buried in Wisconsin soil.
Yes, it is.
And it wasn't brought here by white settlers. It was brought here by Native allies who fought for the Continental Army, who were subsequently betrayed, and who had to carve out a new life in the Midwest. We are going to explore the stories of those incredible overlooked patriots right after this.
Don't go anywhere.
We'll be right back after these messages from the superfans featured in Tales from the Frozen Tundra. Superfans of Titletown.
Well, let me tell you something, brother. Packermania's here to tell you about Tales from the Frozen Tundra, superfans of Titletown. This book contains the stories of 21 Green Bay superfans, including Packermania, where you can find out our favorite Packer memories, our game day traditions, what being a superfan means to us, and so much more, brother. I wanted to participate in this project because the fans involved in this book are some of my best friends in my life, and they're even like family to me, brother. One of the best things about being a Packer fan is being able to give back to our community, and I hope the stories found in this book will encourage all fans, regardless of who you cheer for on Sundays, inspire those who read it, and it shows there's more to being a superfan than just cheering on your team on game day, brother. Now, if you want to see this book become a reality, visit our Kickstarter to learn how you can read the stories of fandom, tailgates, sportsmanship, charity, family, community, and everything that makes cheering on the Pack so special. Go Pack, go, brother!
Hello, my name is Christopher Handler. I am the original Packer fence painter. I paint the fence across from Lambeau Field on the corner of Lombardy and Oneida Street. I will be featured in a book written by Dr. Denny Toll titled Tales from the Frozen Tundra, Superfans of Titletown. I wanted to share my story on how I became the Packer fence painter and what it is like organizing and painting the slogan on the fence. Being a Packer fan means to have a sense of pride and excitement of what I display for all the Packer fans worldwide. Please check out our Kickstarter campaign and donate towards the book. Thank you, and go, Pack, go!
Welcome back to our America 250 grand finale. Before the break, we were talking about how the revolution eventually made its way to Wisconsin. We are turning our attention now to the Revolutionary War itself, and specifically the indigenous patriots who fought, bled, and died for the American cause.
To understand this, we have to look at the complex geopolitics of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which is also commonly known as the Iroquois Confederacy.
Okay.
This was a powerful, highly sophisticated political and military alliance of 6 indigenous nations in what is now New York State. But during the American Revolution, this alliance was tragically fractured by the conflict.
Right, because both the British and the American colonists were aggressively pressuring them to pick a side.
Exactly. 4 of the nations evaluated the treaties, the trade economics, and the encroaching colonial settlements, and they allied with the British. But 2 nations, the Oneida and the Tuscarora, made the agonizingly difficult decision to ally with the American colonists.
And we need to establish a very strict rule for how we discuss this, because history books often get this terribly wrong. The Oneida and Tuscarora were not just background helpers.
No, absolutely not.
They were not sidekicks to George Washington. We have to view them as independent actors. They were sovereign nations, brilliant strategists, fierce soldiers, and seasoned diplomats. They evaluated their political reality and chose an alliance at a tremendous political and human cost to their own people.
Precisely. This was a brutal civil war within their own confederacy. By siding with the Americans, they suffered catastrophic reprisals from the British and their former indigenous allies. Their villages were burned to the ground, their crops were destroyed, and their people were displaced into freezing refugee camps.
And among those who fought tenaciously for the Patriot cause, despite all of that, was a man named James Powless.
Yes. James Powless enlisted in the Continental Army in 1777 at the age of 27. He was a warrior, but his service and leadership were so vital to the American war effort that the Continental Congress actually recognized him officially.
What does that mean practically? Did they just send him a thank you letter?
No, it was much more formal than that. In 1779, Congress resolved to issue official military commissions to key indigenous leaders to solidify the alliance and recognize their command authority.
Wow.
James Powless was formally commissioned as a captain in the Continental Army. He wasn't an auxiliary, he was a commissioned officer of the United States. He fought throughout the war, enduring the worst of the conflict, and received an honorable discharge in 1784.
But the post-war reality was incredibly harsh. This is where the betrayal happened.
That's what he said.
Despite their vital service, despite holding a commission from Congress, aggressive land speculation by the very colonists they helped save began pushing the Oneida out of their ancestral homelands in New York. State treaties, often negotiated under dubious circumstances, stripped them of millions of acres.
It is a dark chapter of the post-revolutionary period. Facing immense pressure and poverty, in 1821, Captain Paulus, acting as chief of the First Christian Party of the Oneida, led his people westward.
Right into our area.
They sought refuge and a new beginning, eventually establishing a settlement along Duck Creek in Wisconsin.
He lived a long time after that, right?
He died in 1849 at the age of 99. He is buried in Brown County, which means there is a genuine, commissioned Revolutionary War officer resting in the soil of the Green Bay region.
That fundamentally changes how we view the geography of the Revolution. It's not just Boston and Philadelphia, it's right here in Brown County. And Captain Paulus, as a young man, was guided by the overarching strategy of one of the most remarkable diplomatic figures of the entire era, Chief Shenandoah.
Chief Shenandoah, famously known as the Pine Tree Chief.
This guy was a towering figure. The sources estimate he was 6'5" stacked, which in the 18th century would make him look like an absolute giant. And he wasn't born into his title, was he?
No. The title of Pine Tree Chief in the Haudenosaunee system is not hereditary. It is a position of honor bestowed purely on merit, outstanding leadership, eloquence in debate, and a commanding presence.
A true earned leader.
He had an incredibly long, complex history of dealing with European powers. During the earlier French and Indian War, he actually allied with the British. He famously saved a group of German colonists from a devastating massacre at German Flats.
But his relationship with the colonists changed dramatically after a specific incident in Albany, right?
Yes. He had a transformative, deeply negative experience with colonial exploitation. He traveled to Albany on diplomatic business, and unscrupulous colonial traders intentionally intoxicated him.
Oh, no.
While he was incapacitated, they stripped him of his chieftainship regalia, his symbols of office and honor. It was a profound humiliation. Upon waking and realizing what the colonists had done, he swore off alcohol forever. And it is a vow he reportedly kept until he died at the age of 110.
So if he had this terrible experience with colonial traders, what drove him to ally with the Patriot cause during the Revolution?
It largely came down to personal diplomacy and his close friendship with a Protestant missionary named Samuel Kirkland. Kirkland lived among the Oneida, respected their customs, and argued passionately for the American cause.
So it was based on trust.
Shenandoah trusted Kirkland, and he threw his massive political influence behind the Americans. He led 250 warriors in support of the colonials, securing the northern frontier. His impact was so highly respected that he received a silver pipe from the New York governor as a token of gratitude.
Now, we have to distinguish his documented, verifiable history from some of the later unsupported superlatives that get attached to legends over the centuries. But his verifiable impact on the war is immense.
It is. His leadership and his ability to mobilize the Oneida people were critical to the survival of the American experiment. And this directly led to an intervention that quite literally changed the course of the war and perhaps world history.
Chief Shenandoah's leadership directly led to one of the most crucial life-saving interventions of the entire Revolutionary War, an intervention that took place in the freezing desperation of Valley Forge. Let's unpack the winter of 1777 to 1778. Because again, we all know the painting of Washington looking sad in the snow, but what was the actual situation on the ground?
If you look at the primary source diaries and letters from Valley Forge, the picture is apocalyptic. The Continental Army is not just cold, they're quite literally starving to death. The colonial supply chain has completely collapsed due to corruption, incompetence, and lack of funds.
They had nothing.
Soldiers are boiling their own shoes to eat the leather. They are ravaged by diseases like typhus, dysentery, and pneumonia. The army is facing total collapse. If they break and disband here, the revolution is over.
Recognizing this catastrophic failure, Chief Shenandoah organizes a desperate relief mission. In April 1778, an Oneida woman named Polly Cooper joins 47 Oneida and Seneca warriors on a grueling 400-mile trek from central New York all the way to Pennsylvania, and they are carrying 60 to 70 bushels of white flint corn on their backs.
Which brings us to the moment of intervention that is so rarely taught. When the Oneida arrive at the Valley Forge encampment, the Continental soldiers are frantic. They're practically feral from hunger.
I can't even imagine.
They see the baskets of food, and they immediately attempt to devour the dried corn raw.
And here is where I need you to explain the biology of this, because this blew my mind when I read the sources. If they had eaten that corn, it would have been a disaster. How does that work?
White flint corn is not like the soft, sweet yellow corn we eat on the cob today. It has an incredibly thick, rock-hard outer hull called a pericarp. It is designed to survive harsh winters.
Okay.
If those starving, severely dehydrated soldiers had eaten that hard, dried grain raw, it would have entered their digestive tracts and absorbed whatever moisture was left in their bodies. The starch would have swollen catastrophically in their malnourished stomachs and intestines.
It would have caused a massive bowel obstruction.
Exactly. It would have ruptured their stomachs or caused fatal blockages. The very food meant to save them would have killed them in agony. The relief mission would have instantly become a mass casualty event.
But Polly Cooper recognized this instantly. She physically intervened. She stepped between these starving soldiers and the food, stopped them from eating the raw grain, and then she demonstrated a sophisticated indigenous food processing technique. It's called nixtamalization. What is the chemistry behind that? How did she fix the corn?
Nixtamalization is a brilliant piece of indigenous food science. You don't just boil the corn. You boil it in a highly alkaline solution made by mixing the water with hardwood ash.
Ash from the fire.
Yes. The potassium hydroxide in the ash chemically attacks that rock-hard hull. It breaks down the hemicellulose bonds. But more importantly than just making it soft enough to chew, the chemical reaction releases bound vital nutrients, specifically niacin, which is vitamin B3.
And without niacin, you get pellagra, which causes skin sores, diarrhea, dementia, and death, which is exactly what happens to starving populations.
Precisely. She used advanced indigenous food chemistry to unlock the nutrition required to save the army.
And she didn't just drop off the food and leave. She stayed for months. She acted as a head cook and a medical nurse for this disease-ridden army. She baked cornbread, she simmered massive kettles of corn soup, and she deliberately mixed in local nuts and whatever salt pork the army had left to maximize the caloric and nutritional density for these starving men. She brought them back from the brink of death.
And we must note her incredible diplomatic integrity here.
Yes, this part is amazing.
When the Continental officers, finally realizing what she had done for them, tried to pay her in colonial currency for her months of grueling labor, she staunchly refused. She stated clearly that it was her duty to assist her allies and friends in their time of dire need. She would not accept money for saving her friends.
Which leads to a really beautiful, tangible piece of history. We must state this clearly. According to Oneida oral tradition, Martha Washington and the officers' wives were so deeply moved by Cooper's generosity and her refusal to take payment that they went to a shop window in Philadelphia and bought her a luxurious black silk shawl and bonnet.
It's a gorgeous piece.
That shawl remains preserved to this very day at the Shaco-Dawee Cultural Center in New York.
It is treated as a sacred heirloom, a physical artifact of that alliance.
I really want you to think about this. Indigenous food science, complex chemistry, and profound personal diplomacy literally saved the Continental Army from starvation. Why isn't this the very first thing taught in middle school textbooks about Valley Forge? We focus entirely on the snow, the bloody footprints, and Baron von Steuben teaching them how to march, but we completely omit the woman who kept their hearts beating long enough to learn those maneuvers.
It's a classic, frustrating example of how historical narratives are flattened and simplified over time. The complex, multiracial, interdependent reality of the revolution is often sanitized into a much simpler myth, marginalizing the most crucial contributors.
Exactly. Just as Polly Cooper's vital role is simplified or omitted, the story of how the Revolutionary War actually started has been reduced to the myth of a single man on a horse. We are going to deconstruct the Midnight Ride and look at the people who actually warned the colonies right after this.
Stay tuned.
We'll be right back after these messages from the superfans featured in Tales from the Frozen Tundra, superfans of Titletown.
Charbonneau. I am known as the greeter of Lambeau, and I'm going to be featured in the Tales from the Frozen Tundra super fans of Titletown. I was asked to be in part of this book, and I just couldn't believe it. Dr. Denny asked me if I wanted to be part of it. I said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "This is a great honor." And oh my God, I'm so humbled. And I've been a Green Bay Packer fan for over 50 years, and I'm going to be 71 in October. What I love about the Green Bay Packers is community, togetherness, but to me, it's family. We all get together at the mayor of Lot 1, Scotty, and we all superfans meet up there. This book is going to be on Kickstart, so if you would look at it, I would appreciate it. My story, all the super fan stories, and everybody else's story. So you'll know why I have 70 costumes made by my sister Barb on her sewing machine. Thank you so much, and go Pack Go.
Hi everyone, Steve the Owner Tate here, and I've been asked to be a part of a fun project called Tales from the Frozen Tundra. It's a book project, and man, I've grown up a lifelong Packer fan, and from that I've been able to travel to a lot of places and go to a lot of games, and I've even gotten to know fans from other teams, stay with them, and it's really become about the relationships. And so why this book project really interests me is I know a lot of these people in this book, but you only know certain parts of their story. And it's always cool getting to know people better and knowing what really drives them and what motivates them. So not only am I a part of this, I'm going to get to know my friends better and learn more and enjoy life a little bit better. So I hope you get involved. It's got a Kickstarter where they're trying to raise some funds for it. I'll be posting that on my social media. And one more thing. Go Pack Go!
Welcome back to Titletown's Patriots. When most of us think about the start of the American Revolution, we picture exactly one guy. Paul Revere, galloping through the dark on his horse, wearing a tricorn hat, shouting that the British are coming.
It's an incredibly powerful, enduring image. But it was largely cemented in the national consciousness by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's poem, which was written in 1861 on the eve of the Civil War to inspire patriotism.
So it was propaganda.
Exactly. The actual historical reality of April 1775 is far more complex and far more compelling than the myth of a lone savior.
Why do we only know Revere? What was actually happening that night?
It was not one guy shouting in the dark. It was a massive, decentralized, highly organized intelligence network. We are talking about an alarm system comprising over 40 patriots, professional riders, doctors, local tavern owners, town leaders, and every single one of them was risking execution for high treason to spread the warning.
Right. Let's look at the mechanics of what actually happened on the night of April 18th. Dr. Joseph Warren, who is running the Patriot intelligence ring in Boston, discovers that the British regulars are moving out to seize the militia's munitions stored at Concord.
A huge crisis.
He doesn't just send Paul Revere. That would be a terrible strategic risk. He also sends a man named William Dawes via a completely different, much longer land route to ensure the message gets through if one is captured.
Smart planning.
Dawes successfully evades the British guards stationed on the Boston Neck. Revere rows across the river and gets a horse. They both eventually meet up in Lexington.
And in Lexington, they run into a third man who is arguably the most important figure of the night, Dr. Samuel Prescott.
Who is Prescott?
Prescott is fascinating. He's a 24-year-old local physician who happened to be riding home at 1 a.m. after visiting his fiancée.
Right place, right time.
He is a high son of liberty. He knows the terrain perfectly, and he agrees to join Revere and Dawes to help carry the alarm to Concord. But as the three of them ride together toward Concord, they hit a British cavalry patrol roadblock in the dark.
And this is where the poem completely falls apart. The famous Paul Revere, the hero of the story, gets captured at gunpoint right there. His ride is over. William Dawes gets thrown from his horse in the chaos, loses his watch, and has to escape on foot into the woods.
It was actually Samuel Prescott, the local guy who knew exactly where he was, who spurs his horse, jumps it over a jagged stone wall, evades the British patrol in the dark, and successfully rides on to reach Concord.
Wow.
It was Prescott who triggered the alarm that allowed the militia to secure the munitions and prepare for the battle that led to the shot heard round the world.
Revere gets the famous poem, but Prescott actually delivered the critical message to Concord. But even beyond Massachusetts, the communication network is insane. Think about the marathon riders. Consider Israel Bissell.
Israel Bissell was a professional postwriter. While Revere and Prescott were warning local towns, Bissell was handed the official call to arms dispatched by the Committee of Safety. His job was to carry the news of the bloodshed at Lexington and Concord to the southern colonies.
We are talking about a punishing, almost unbelievable physical feat for a rider and a horse.
Bissell rode 345 miles in just 4 days and 6 hours.
That's absurd.
He rode down through Massachusetts, into Connecticut, across New York, through New Jersey, and all the way into Philadelphia. The physical toll of riding at a gallop for that long is devastating.
It has to be.
A horse can only sustain a gallop for a short period before its muscles begin to break down from lactic acid and heat exhaustion. Bissell had to constantly requisition new horses, and he literally rode several animals to death.
Just to get the word out.
He rode until he was physically collapsing, just to galvanize the Southern militias into joining the rebellion before the British could isolate New England.
And we also have to look at the immense diversity of this rebellion from the very first moments. On the exact same night that Paul Revere was riding west toward Lexington, a man named Wentworth Cheswell was riding north. Who was he?
Wentworth Cheswell was a biracial, highly educated patriot living in New Hampshire. He was a wealthy landowner, a teacher, and actually holds the distinction of being the first black man elected to public office in the United States. He was deeply involved in the Patriot cause and served as the designated messenger for his local committee of safety.
So while Revere goes west, Cheswell rides his horse north through the dark to Portsmouth and Exeter to warn the coastal towns of impending British naval attacks. He secured the northern flank of the rebellion while the shooting started in Massachusetts. It demonstrates so clearly that the rebellion was a multiracial, diverse coalition from the very first night.
It was a collective effort. And if we jump ahead in the war to 1781, to a completely different theater, we find a ride that was arguably more tactically significant than anything that happened in Massachusetts. The Midnight Dash of the South.
Jack Jewett.
Jack Jewett. He's a 26-year-old Virginia militia captain. In June 1781, the war has moved south. The British forces under Lord Cornwallis are pushing deep into Virginia.
So they're making a major push.
They send the notoriously ruthless Lieutenant Colonel Bannister Tarleton and his cavalry on a lightning raid to capture Governor Thomas Jefferson and the entire Virginia legislature, who had fled the capital and were hiding out in Charlottesville.
That would be devastating.
If they capture Jefferson and the lawmakers, the political leadership of the South collapses.
Jack Jewett happens to be sleeping outside a tavern. He wakes up in the middle of the night, hears the thundering of hooves, and spots this massive column of 250 British cavalrymen moving fast. He instantly deduces they are heading for Jefferson at Monticello.
So he mounts his mare, Sally, and takes off.
But here's the problem. He can't use the main highway because Tarleton's cavalry is already on it.
Exactly. To beat them there, he has to take a shortcut. He has to ride 40 miles completely off-road.
Explain the physical reality of riding 40 miles off-road through the Virginia backwoods in the middle of the night.
It is practically suicidal. You are navigating dense, tangled, virgin forest in the pitch black, guided only by the moonlight. You can't see the groundhog holes that could snap your horse's leg.
One wrong step and it's over.
But more terribly, you are riding at a desperate gallop through thick, thorny brush. Low-hanging branches and thick vines are whipping across your body. For over 6 hours, Jewett is being lacerated, beaten, and torn apart by the forest.
The primary sources say his face was permanently, horribly scarred by the journey. He was whipped to shreds. But he pushes through that agony, and he reaches Monticello with just minutes to spare.
Minutes?
He warns Jefferson and the legislature. Jefferson barely escapes into the woods as the British cavalry literally charges up his front lawn. Jack Jewett's agonizing, bloody ride literally saved the American leadership from decapitation.
It is a harrowing story of pure physical endurance and willpower. Now, when we discuss these revolutionary riders, we also must address the story of Sybil Ludington.
The famous story of the 16-year-old girl who rides 40 miles in the pouring rain in 1777 to rally her father's militia after the British burned Danbury, Connecticut. It's a great story, but is it true?
This is where we need expert nuance and where the study of history gets really interesting. Modern historiography rigorously debates the specifics of her ride.
Why is that?
Because the primary evidence for her completing a 40-mile solo route in the dark doesn't come from 18th century newspapers or contemporary military dispatches. It comes heavily from a family memoir published in 1907, over a century later.
Ah, I see.
Historians have to weigh the reliability of secondary family lore against the lack of primary contemporary documents.
But wait, so we just throw her out of the history books because we don't have a piece of paper from 1777?
No, we absolutely shouldn't dismiss her entirely. Historians argue over the exact mileage or whether she rode alone, but she remains a vital, enduring symbol.
That's a good point.
The debate doesn't negate the fact that women on the home front were constantly displaying immense courage, gathering intelligence, and defending their properties while the armies marched. She represents a very real demographic of resistance.
I want you to consider this. Why do we prefer the neat, tidy myth of a lone savior like Paul Revere on a horse? Why is that the story we tell children when the messy, collective reality of dozens of diverse citizens, Doctors jumping walls, teenagers, black landowners, exhausted post riders, a militia captain shredding his face in the woods, risking their lives in a massive web of intelligence. Isn't that actually a much better story?
We crave simplicity in our national myths because it's easier to build a monument to one man. But the complex reality shows us that the Republic wasn't saved by a superhero. It was saved by a collective, desperate effort of ordinary people making impossible choices.
And as America approaches its 250th anniversary, we aren't just reevaluating these old stories and poems. We are digging up entirely new ones, literally pulling them out of the dirt. We will dive into the groundbreaking new archaeological discoveries right after this.
See you in a minute.
We'll be right back after this final sponsored message from Tales from the Frozen Tundra, superfans of Titletown. Preserving the legacy of Titletown superfans takes a community, and this is your final opportunity to be part of it. The Kickstarter campaign for Tales from the Frozen Tundra has a $3,000 all-or-nothing goal. If the campaign falls short, absolutely no funds are collected, and the print release of this incredible history will be delayed. There are amazing rewards available: digital copies, paperbacks, hardcovers, signed editions, and exclusive superfan and supporter packages. If you cannot pledge financially, you can still help immensely by simply sharing the campaign with fellow fans. Pledge now, go to Kickstarter, and search Tales from the Frozen Tundra. All right, we are back. As we look toward the 250th anniversary, historians and archaeologists aren't just reading old books. They are actively unearthing new physical evidence that redefines our understanding of the founding era.
And we must use careful framing here as we discuss this. Science and history are always evolving. Researchers have recently highlighted new evidence, newly examined records suggest different perspectives on the founders, and historians continue to evaluate these findings. We are looking at developing scholarship here, not permanently settled dogma.
Let's start with Liberty Hill and Fort Ticonderoga in upstate New York. There has been a massive archaeological dig there between 2024 and 2026. Set the scene for us. What happened at Liberty Hill?
Liberty Hill is hallowed ground for the Continental Army. On July 28, 1776, this was the site where the Declaration of Independence was first read aloud to the Northern Department of the Continental Army.
Okay, so a huge moment for morale.
We have to remember the state of this army. They had just retreated from a disastrous failed invasion of Quebec. They were battered, freezing, and riddled with disease.
Just totally broken.
Reading the Declaration to them in the mud gave this starving army a defined, higher ideological mission to sustain their breaking morale. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore, they were fighting for a new nation.
And what archaeologists found buried in that mud recently is incredible. Over 500 pristine artifacts that had been untouched for centuries. Fragmented firearms, mortar shells, cast iron kettles, intricately stamped regimental coat buttons, and the lid of a traveling inkstand, which is called a penner. These aren't just objects, they are a tangible human connection to the men who camped there.
Exactly. When you find a penner, you realize someone sat in the freezing cold writing a letter home to their family that they might never see again.
That gives me chills.
It grounds the abstract, lofty ideology of the Declaration of Independence in the muddy, freezing, terrifying reality of a military camp. And the human cost of that reality was brought into incredibly sharp focus by another discovery near Lake George.
In 2019, construction work accidentally disturbed what turned out to be the Cortlandt Street burying ground. They found the remains of over 40 Continental soldiers who died during that same disastrous 1775 to 1776 Quebec campaign.
The forensic records indicate they were overwhelmed not just by British forces, but by a horrific smallpox epidemic. We forget how deadly disease was.
It was a massive killer.
Smallpox claimed up to 100,000 lives during the Revolution. It was a microscopic enemy that decimated the ranks far more efficiently than British muskets.
And in May 2026, the New York State Museum did something breathtaking with those remains. Utilizing advanced 3D printed skull scans and forensic artistry, they unveiled a facial reconstruction of one of those recovered skeletons. How does that even work, and what did they see?
Forensic artists take the exact topography of the skull and use tissue depth markers based on human anatomy to reconstruct the muscle and skin layers over the bone. When they finished, they brought the face of a teenage Revolutionary War soldier back to life.
Wow.
You weren't looking at an old oil painting of a general. You were looking at the face of a kid who died freezing, sick, and alone in the wilderness.
It strips away all the romanticism, doesn't it? It reminds us how incredibly young these soldiers were. But beyond the battlefields, new archival research is shifting our understanding of the intellectual environment of the era. Historians have recently uncovered records showing a woman named Eliza Harriet giving over 100 public lectures in the 1780s on the concept of female genius and the necessity of equal education for women.
This is a major find because it challenges the idea that feminist thought didn't exist in the public sphere during the founding era. She was renting out halls and speaking to large crowds about intellectual equality.
And the kicker: George Washington himself was documented in attendance at her speeches. It suggests the founders were engaging directly with early feminist intellectualism. We've also seen the Smithsonian recently preserve an impeccably hand-knit campaign flag from Thomas Jefferson's 1800 presidential election, which was miraculously found in a trash heap decades ago and saved.
Archival researchers are also highlighting fascinating nuances in early constitutional drafts. For example, noting that some states originally debated implementing an age ceiling of 60 years old for judges, showing that debates over age limits and cognitive decline in the Republic are literally as old as the nation itself.
And just to be perfectly clear, as we discuss this, we are not taking sides on any modern political framing of these age or gender debates. We are impartially reporting the historical artifacts and the original source material that researchers are evaluating. But think about the emotional impact of all this. Unearthing a regimental button at Liberty Hill is exactly like a fan finding a pristine 1920s Acme Packers artifact buried in a Wisconsin basement. It connects you directly to the past. When you can look into the reconstructed face of a teenage soldier or hold a brass button that snapped off a coat in 1776, history stops being a dry textbook. It becomes a visceral human reality.
It collapses the distance between the past and the present. It makes the founders and the soldiers human again.
Before our final reflection, we'll hear from two more voices from Tales from the Frozen Tundra. Super fans of Titletown.
Hi there, Wayne Sargent, also known as the Ultimate Packer Fan. You know, back growing up, I never ever thought I'd be a super fan of the Green Bay Packers. Coming from New Hampshire, I watched the Packers in the mid-'60s, late 60s, you know, with my dad. Then I moved to Wisconsin for a career change and, you know, started going to Lambeau Field, and I won the first ever Packer Partners Club of Champions Ultimate Fan Contest. And since then, people started calling me Ultimate. And I had all these patches and made myself a jersey, and, well, the rest is kind of history. So you can follow the rest of my story and others of other great super fans on Tales of the Frozen Tundra. Right now, we're starting off a kickoff program. Please visit our site and help donate and make this book possible. Thank you.
Hey guys, my name is Dr. Denny Toll. I am the author of Tales from the Frozen Tundra, Superfans of Titletown. Now this project is very near and dear to my heart because I am a huge fan of the Green Bay Packers, like a lot of you are. But the people that we see in the stadium, in the stands, in the tailgate zones that are the anchor for us as fans, I call them super fans. Now it's a title that not everybody likes and all that, but for this reason, we will just go with, they're called super fans. They're fans that go above and beyond what a normal fan does. And I love them. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to tell their stories, because they are just as much a part of Packers history as the players on the field. Now, right now, this book is in its Kickstarter crowdfunding stage, and we need to hit our $3,000 goal. Now, right now, as of this recording, we are at 23%. That means we're just over, I think, right around $700. And we need to get to 3,000. So right now we have 22 days left, and we need a major push to get this funded. So what the crowdfunding is going towards is the printing costs, the materials, the shipping, the collector's editions, and all of that stuff. And that's why we need to get this going. I wanted to do this independently and self-publish it and not go through a big corporate publishing company. So I'm asking for your help to get these stories told. Again, my name is Dr. Denny Toll, and I can't wait until this book comes out. Go Pack Go.
Welcome back for the final moments of Titletown's Patriots.
As we pull the threads of this entire deep dive series together, a very clear picture emerges. Patriotism has never belonged to one single profession. It doesn't belong to one race, it doesn't belong to one specific battlefield, and it certainly doesn't belong to one generation.
Exactly. Some of the Patriots we've discussed wore uniforms and stormed beaches in World War II, or flew dangerous medevac missions into firefights in Afghanistan. Others wore no uniform at all. They rode horses through tangled backwoods in the dark to warn their neighbors. Some fed starving armies with white flint corn or healed the sick with hardwood ash. And some preserved local history and community pride by painting fences in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
The veterans of the Green Bay Packers do not sit apart from the American story. They are not a separate chapter. They are a direct continuation of the civic duty that was forged at Fort Howard and Valley Forge. The American story is collective. It is unfinished. And it is vastly larger than any single legend.
For me, looking back at all the sources we've poured over, the story that changed my understanding the most was Jack Jewett. Riding 40 miles off-road, through branches and vines, physically tearing his face open in the dark just to warn the legislature. We talk about serving the country, and we usually picture a press uniform on a battlefield. But sometimes, serving your country looks like a 26-year-old militia captain shredding himself in the woods because he knows the government has to survive the night. Or it looks like Polly Cooper refusing to take money for saving an army because it was simply the right thing to do. It completely redefines what dedication actually looks like.
It's a powerful realization that service takes whatever form the moment requires.
As we close this grand finale, we want to read a solemn, selective roll call representing all the eras and all the forms of service we've covered in this series. We honor Tony Canadeo, Hal Van Every, Bob Forte, Al Sparlis, Paul Hornung, Ray Nitschke, Boyd Dowler, Chris Kitsy, Darren College, Howard Smiley Johnson, and Emlyn Tunnell. They stand in for the many, many more we've discussed.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as we conclude. As America looks ahead to its next 250 years, think about the artifacts we are creating right now, today. A digital photograph taken at a tailgate, a handwritten letter sent home from a modern deployment, a handmade sign held up in a stadium. These are the Liberty Hill buttons of our future. These are the artifacts that future historians will dig up centuries from now to understand exactly who we were and what we valued.
Thank you to everyone listening. Thank you to the veterans, to the fallen service members, to the superfans, and to everyone who helped build this series. For 250 years, the American story has been carried forward by people willing to serve something larger than themselves. Some wore uniforms, some carried messages, some carried food, some carried the wounded, some carried the flag. Our responsibility is to carry their stories.
Happy birthday, America.
Go Pack, go.